Hello, everyone. My name is Julie McVey, and this is Unordinary Made Ordinary, where we talk about extraordinary experiences of everyday people. And today, our guest is Dr. Mary Helen Hensley. Welcome to the program.
Hello, thanks for having me.
I am so excited about this conversation. So would you mind just sharing just a little bit about who you are, a little background on yourself?
Okay.
Where do
I'm
I
Mary
begin?
Helen. I'm Mary Helen. I'm a Pisces. I like long walks on the beach. Um, no, I'm in
Thank you.
Ireland. So, and everybody's like, that's not an Irish accent. No, it's not. I'm from Virginia, from the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. And I've lived in Ireland for 22 years. So I came over here chasing ancient symbols many years ago and then ended up coming back and setting up my chiropractic practice and used it as a hub to travel, research, write books, and have my two daughters here. And so I've kind of been here ever since.
Wow, wonderful. Okay, so if you wouldn't mind, because we don't have a whole lot of time, but let's get into your experience, if that's okay, your near-death
Sure.
experience. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So leading up to that NDE, just to give you kind of because this is what everybody asks. Oh my God, that just happened out of the blue. It's been unusual from the start for me. So
Okay,
my
that's good
father
to
was,
know.
my father was a Southern Baptist minister. And so, I was raised kind of in that world. And when my mother was pregnant with me, she was 41. And back in the day, back in the 60s, she found out she had German measles when she was in the first trimester. So nowadays, not really a big deal. Back then, kiss of death. And so they got called in and they were like, listen, and I was the fourth to come along, and, they were that bit older, and they were like, look, this doesn't look good. And you need to kind of get your head around the idea that everything's not going to be okay. And so that's the news they were sent off with. And so they went home, and not long afterwards, my father had this experience that he called a celestial experience, which is really weird for a religious man. You'd think it was like an angelic experience, or, he was visited by the Holy Spirit. He called it a celestial experience because these beings came to him and he had no words for what they were. They were not human. They were not angels, and they just rocked his socks. And so basically they come in and they're like, okay, so this daughter that's coming to you. So remember, this is back in the 60s. And so there's no ultrasound. So they didn't even know I was a girl. So they're like, this daughter that's coming is not only going to be healthy and well, but it's going to have some unusually extraordinary gifts that are coming in. And so your job is to nurture her as she comes along. And then that was that. And so when I did finally come out, there were no complications or problems or whatever. And so from the time I was really small, anytime I was a little kid and I was crying about something or upset or whatever, I was always soothed with, listen, don't worry, you're promised. And so the very first book I ever wrote was called Promised because of that. And it was Dad's way of saying, listen, we have an inside here. Everything's going to be okay. You're here for a purpose. And so, that was kind of how it started. And so when I was about 4 or 5, I had what I always call the kitchen table talk, where my dad called me into the kitchen because my parents were going bonkers at this stage. And, they'd been waiting around because my father had been told, by these celestial beings that I would be unusual. You're kind of waiting for all right,
sure.
what's happening? Like going to grow horns. What's happening here? And so they finally started to realize what was going on. And so I get called in, sat down at the kitchen table. My father was a huge man, 6'2", big booming voice. And he said, Sugar, do you know the difference between alive and dead? I'm like 4, right? And I'm like, And so the reason for the question was because they had enough now at this stage because my best friend was my grandfather, Judge, my mom's dad, and he was a surgeon from Kentucky. He used to work with Edgar Casey, actually. And
Wow.
yeah, and so Judge was my world, and everything I knew at that stage in my young life was because of Judge. And we would talk, and he would, tell me stories and take me places and do things and all this. And of course, I would tell my parents about all of this. And finally, they have to reveal to me at the kitchen table that Judge has been dead since I was one. So that's when things
Okay.
started getting a little weird. Yeah.
That's a little weird.
So I didn't step into a near death experience kind of with no understanding. What I was taught to believe, no different than yourself, you went through the religious portion of your life, at that early age, what I knew to be true was literally based by what I was hearing in church. And my father was the minister. So what I was hearing at home as well.
Mhm.
And we weren't fire and brimstone or anything like that. My dad was a motivational speaker. He was a football player and a football coach. So it was always about sports, and it was, it was always really positive and motivational in its tone. So I grew up in that atmosphere,
Mm.
and, but very much so, there's a heaven and there's a hell. And, but we never talked about hell because it was just expected that you were getting into heaven
Mhm.
because you were going to do the right thing and you were going to behave. And these are the way that, the rules in which we live by and all this kind of stuff. And so that's kind of how I grew up. But when these things were happening, such as me talking to my dead grandfather, and I started dreaming things and they would happen, and, so I had some really unusual little things going on. But you get into your teenage years, and my parents had always said, listen, this is between us. I think they didn't want me to be taken advantage of, exploited, whatever. They didn't want me to be the weird one, or it's
Yeah.
too late for that. But we kept it to ourselves. Even my siblings didn't know. And so
Wow.
I grew up in my teenage years, kind of like, instead of really celebrating this great gift, I started trying to hide it,
Oh, yeah.
And then when I went off to college, again, same thing. You're the new kid on the block, you're meeting all your new friends. And then, my roommate was the first time anybody turns to me, she goes, you never sleep. And I was like, oh, you noticed, and what I would do was, because so much stuff happened to me during the night. And like, I didn't have the experience of knowing if I'm living in the same room with another person and Judge, my grandfather, turns up, is like, is that going to scare the bejesus out of her? It's like, what's happening here?
Mm.
So I used to catnap in college and not
Oh,
sleep at night.
wow.
And so, I ended up telling my roommate about it. And, I would like know the score of the basketball game, and we go cheer the basketball game and come and open up the envelope with the score in it. And that
Oh
was me
my.
serving humanity. And so it
Having a
was
little
kind of a
fun.
running joke. So by the time the near death experience happened at the age of 21, I had just graduated from college. And back in those days, if you were dating somebody that when you were in college, you were kind of, your mom's picking out China and Crystal, and you're going to move to his hometown, and you guys are going to follow on and get married. And that's what you did.
Mhm.
So off I went to Charleston, South Carolina with my beau. And this is where my accident took place. And, it was December 14th, 1991. I was 21, about to be 22 in February. And I was on my way to a Christmas party for my job. And like, I'd graduated with my big diplomas, and I was mopping floors in a sign company. And I couldn't get a job. And it was the best thing because they were wonderful there, and they really taught me a lot of the basic principles of life, and about learning a business from the bottom up, and be the best floor mopper if you're going to be the best boss.
Yep.
And that was a great time. But I'm on my way to this party, and it's December 14th, and it's hot in Charleston at that time. So I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and I had on a little jingle bell around my neck. And I get to this intersection that's at a highway that's a major highway in Charleston. So it really, it runs all the way down through Georgia to Florida. It's Highway 17. And so I'm sitting here, and you've got all these lanes of traffic with the traffic coming towards me. And then I'm trying to get over here to go towards town. So I'm sitting at a red light, and when my light finally turns green, I make it all the way across and I'm getting ready to turn in to go towards town down these lanes. And I look and I realize, oh my gosh, that car is going really fast. And it was an 81-year-old man, and he was running the red light. He was pedal to the metal and blowing through the red light just in time to T-bone my car. So he hit me, side impact, folded the car in half. But what was so interesting was right when I saw him coming at me, this is when everything just kind of stood still. And so like, it's like time stopped, and I had all the time in the world because there wasn't any time. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting ready to go. Just as casually as you please. No fear, no anything.
Really?
It wasn't, oh, I'm too young. It wasn't like that.
Wow.
It was just
Okay.
like, oh, okay, I'm dying here. And so I'm looking at that and I go, how do I want to do this? Do I want to stay in the body, feel the impact, then die? Or do I want to go out of the body? And so I was like, I'll take option B, please. And out of the body I went.
Okay.
Everything speeds up and smash. I'm now witnessing my own death. So this is an unusual factor, with a lot of NDEs, because, they'll die and then they'll remember, they'll see themselves coming out of the body or whatever. I actually came out of the body, which is quite common, but not something that a lot of people remember. I came out of the body and then the body got hit. So when my body got smashed, there was no one occupying it.
Weird.
So
Yeah.
my suit got hit, and so I'm witnessing this and I'm watching the car spin around and my head goes through the window. I
Wow.
broke my neck. The seat folds up, there's glass blowing out of all the windows, and this whole spectacle is taking place.
Wow.
And I'm watching. And the whole time that I was watching, there was a sound. And so all of the work that I do today is all based on frequency, because I've spent my entire adult life chasing these tones, because the sounds that allowed my vibration to speed up enough to get me, who I really am, out of this body, this just fascinated me, because it stayed in a lower register. And I don't mean low vibration, but just a lower sounding register.
Okay.
In order to keep me connected to the body. So this is the difference in being dead and being dead.
Oh,
right.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So I'm like watching this and I can hear the sound. So now I'm witnessing everything happening below. I watch the car spin and, come to a halt there. I see the people gathering, and a girl I went to college with had been a couple of cars behind me. And like, Charleston's a big place. And so she just happened to be there and watched the whole thing. I got to see her recognize that it was me, and I could feel everything she was feeling. It was wild. But I still wasn't like pining away or trying to clamor to get back into the body. I'm just looking down at the body. And this is the genes thing that we were talking about earlier. The best description to date that I can give of that is, if you've been outside and you're working out in the yard and you're hot and you're sweaty, and you finally finish at the end of a long, hard day, and you come in and you peel those jeans off and you throw them into the floor and they're gross and nasty, and you go up and take the best shower you've ever had. The last thing on your mind while you're having that shower is the dirty, wet jeans on the floor. So that's the way it feels when you're leaving the body. And subsequently, coming back into the body feels like putting on a pair of heavy, wet jeans.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what was taking place at that stage. And, there I was just looking down and watched everything happen. I watched the guy reach through the windows and turn the engine off. I watched a lady come and put her name on the front seat, her name and phone number on the front seat of the car. And then everything changed. So the vibration that I was talking about before, again, changed pitch, it changed register, it sped up.
Okay.
And when it sped up, I was no longer in the space where I was looking at that 3D plane beneath me. This is where a lot of near-death experiencers will talk about the tunnel of light. For me, it was just whoosh. There was no, I just like flew through that thing. And I was in this space in 1 second, and then in this space in the next. And the vibration here was completely different than here. This was lower, denser, very comforting, nothing, nothing sinister about it whatsoever. But then you get into this vibration. It's like, oh my God, the music of the spheres, like sounds, feelings, colors you've never felt before, you've never seen before. They were you were like part of your
Mm,
environment. And this is that first sensation of connecting back to the one, of
mm,
realizing you're part of the source there.
hmm.
And it's really, really nice. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So I'm just curious, when you were looking back on your body,
Mhm.
um, and the whole scene, did you feel particularly sad or frightened, or the emotions that we might normally feel when we're looking at an accident, especially if it's our own self? So just
Mhm.
kind of chill, like how would you describe the feelings,
Yeah, not at
emotion?
all. You're looking back at it and it's just very matter of fact. It is what it is. Um,
Hmm.
I was
Okay.
looking at myself. I could see my body, but I also didn't have any connection to that body being me. That
Oh,
body
you knew
was,
it was you though, right?
but it wasn't me. Me was who
Well,
was
I mean,
watching
you
it
knew it
that
was
day.
your old suit or whatever.
No, but that's what I'm saying though. It's like, and that's the connection you have to it. It's like,
Okay.
oh,
Okay.
if I started talking about all the different cars I've driven in my life, I had some really fun ones, and they were great cars and all that, but like I don't lay awake thinking about them at night, and it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
it was that kind of sensation. I was like, there's the body. Oh, that's
Oh, that
interesting.
was right. Like, oh yeah,
You're
that was a cool
Yeah,
car
that
I
was
used to
cool.
drive
Oh, she was
around in.
cute. Like, yeah,
Hmm,
it was that kind of sensation. So
interesting.
no pining at all.
Mm,
That's not really, I think, the time when that kind of thing happens anyway. I think when more so in this next experience. So, you arrive in this
okay.
this new space. And when I land in there, I had all the time in the world to just settle in and be
Hmm,
in that space. And it was just beautiful. And it's overwhelming. I said in one of the books when I was talking about it, sometimes it's so beautiful it hurts to remember it. I try not to focus too much on it, because it was, you know, it's like that love you lost, of whatever, if you've ever had that deep, great love in your life, and it was just wow. If I
wow.
think
So you
about it
miss
too
it.
much,
So you miss it. You. It sounds like you have a longing still for that
I just have
feeling.
I can still, if I can conjure the feeling of it like that. So
Wow.
yeah,
Hmm,
um, but
wow.
I'm not homesick, if you get me, because again,
Mm,
I know, like we had mentioned before, if you're lucky enough to live 80 to 100 years here, you've done a good run. That's what this plane is about. Um, so it's really a blink of an eye, a blink of a blink of an eye.
huh.
So I'm not like, I'm going to enjoy every moment that I have here because I know that I'm going back there.
Yeah.
I know that that's my, and that's not a final destination either, because that's not where I was. Because if it had been a final destination, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you.
True.
It was the halfway house, which was pretty darn nice. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so it was in that space, and I'm kind of like realizing, oh shit, I'm dead. It's really just landing in.
Yeah.
And there's no shock or horror with that. And I didn't have any sense of, oh my gosh, I'm not young, I'm too young, and I didn't finish what I went to do. There was just
Mm.
none of that. There was just like, oh, this is awesome. And you're sitting there, and all of a sudden the atmosphere in front of me starts taking shape.
Okay.
And from the time I was very young, I've always loved old people, very much so, like in a strange way, where other kids might be wanting to go off and play with their friends. I was like, let's go visit the nursing home. And it's
Maybe
because I
because of
could
Judge,
see things. Yeah. And I could, yeah,
I
absolutely. And
mean, best friend.
I could see energy around people, and I could watch. And
Oh,
the death process is so beautiful to watch. It's not like a
oh,
dimmer switch going down and their life force is burning down. It's quite the opposite. It's fabulous
wow.
fireworks show, and I loved watching that. And so I was fascinated by the nursing home, and
Oh,
I also kind of knew at that
wow.
stage, because I could see the things. I'm like, oh, that body's just dying. And that would make me sad because it might be somebody I love, but it would be
Wow.
you're watching watching them take flight, and it was incredible. So it stood to
Wow.
reason that the two manifestations that came in front of me came as elderly gentlemen,
Mm.
like really, really old men. And I just loved them. And I stood there and I'm looking and they're waiting very patiently. And I'm like, I'm supposed to know who you are, and I don't know who you are. And they just waited. And then all of a sudden, boom, it hit. And I was like, oh my gosh, these are my guides. Guys, we have guides. We have cheerleaders. We have people who are there with us since the dawn of time. And I was like, oh, these are mine. They look like old men. Oh, it was amazing. Um, and so there they were, great homecoming, surrounded by just indescribable love,
Mm.
indescribable.
Mm.
And it was then that I got to do what I think is still to this day one of the most extraordinary things that I've ever experienced on any plane, any level that we're talking about. It literally dissolved my understanding of space and time, because I'm watching myself. This is the life review experience, and I'm in what was like a 360 IMAX. And all of a sudden, instead of watching myself in linear time, which to date, consciously was all I knew,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like 2 years old over here, and I'm 12 years old at Living History Day and, at school. And I'm 5 years old getting lost at Virginia Beach. And I'm 17 years old going through a rape. And I'm 11 years old and my dog Otto is dying. And I'm 20 years old and I'm deciding what I want to do next year at school. All of them are happening simultaneously.
Wow.
So it was incredible. So like everything I thought I knew to be true about space and time just goes, and I now have this, it's implanted. It's this understanding of concurrent time,
Mm.
of parallel times, that I'm able to be this and this at the same time, which is important all these years later in the work that I'm doing. Because when you're taking people, when you're rescuing people from themselves and their misconceptions of this world, what you're doing is you're bringing them, boom, and plunking them straight into present time, because you can't do anything if you're in the past or in the future without being in present time.
Mm.
So all of our horrors and traumas, they're not happening right now. They're happening back then or up there. The things that we fear the most are the things that haven't happened yet. The things that haunt us at night are the things that already happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's right now. And so it was really, really interesting to watch it take place, because it's like there's never going to be words to explain that concept to somebody. It's like it happens to you and you can't unsee it. You
Mm-hmm.
can't unknow it. You can't unfeel it.
Mm.
And so when coming back into this world and coming back in with that kind of information, it's really hard to get upset about a lot of things. The most challenging part is when you're dealing with somebody who's really hurting
Mm.
and who's
Yeah.
really struggling and who's really suffering, who sees you as disconnected or flippant or not understanding what they're going through. Or little do they know, I understand more than anything in the world. I just can't connect sadness to it.
Mm.
I can't connect fear to it. I can't, and so then that's probably anywhere where I react, where I'd be angst ridden or, whatever, is because I can't get them to see it the way that I'm seeing it, or feel
Yeah.
it the way that I'm feeling it, or understand what I'm actually seeing when they're telling me those things. It's not that I don't care. It's not that I can't connect, or it's not that I'm not being genuine in my understanding of the pain that they're in. I'm like, okay, come on, let's get present.
Mm.
Got it. I understand where that is.
Okay.
What can we do now? And
True.
you know,
Yeah.
that doesn't work for everybody. And I
Yeah.
am not for everybody. And I recognize that, but I can't be anything else other than that. I've seen that which cannot be unseen. So how do you force yourself to feel bad or think that it's the end of the world when there's a challenge
Right.
in front of you, when you know that's not the case?
Right.
And it really pisses a lot of people off, you know? Um, because they can't conceptualize, and they
Yeah.
feel unheard or unseen.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So that's
Okay.
the, you
So,
know,
I mean, that makes sense what you're sharing, and it's really timely for me personally, but I won't get into that. What I want to get into is, so you're here with your guides, and then what happens?
so in that space, all of a sudden, nobody made me come back. I went, oh my gosh, I'm going back. It was
Oh.
just a matter of fact because I can see my own timeline happening.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I can
Good.
already see me back. So it
Gotcha.
wasn't a case of, oh, I have to decide. This is the greatest quandary of my life. I was already there. I was like, oh, that's how this happens.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
have a deep, deep faith and trust in that which is, unknown or unseen because I already kind of know how it works out. Um, and so I get back in here after making that choice, and I'm back into that body, and that
Mm,
body is smashed. And
mm,
um, they had used the jaws of life and all this. And when I came to, I'm on the pavement outside of the car, and they'd had to get me out of. I don't know if they took me out. I think the passenger side, and I'm on the pavement. And now because all this has just happened, I wake up in that body, and I'm like, it's like waking you go to sleep in one simulation and you wake up in a different one, right? And now I'm back in the other one again. And I was like, so I go and try to stand up. Now imagine, like my neck is broken, right? My pelvis is smashed. And I'm like staggering up to my feet. And then I just went boom and collapsed down. Now that I have a vivid memory of. And so now I'm back on the pavement and they're strapping me to, because the ambulance people are like, don't move. And then boom, I'm out of consciousness again. And then I wake up and I'm in an ambulance, and this lady's like stroking my hair. Don't cry, because I'm like screaming about death, right? And she's like, we're not going to let you die. And I'm trying to explain to them, I've already been dead. And so when I awaken again in the ER, I'm like, there's this guy there. And I looked at him and I'm like, I know you, and I'm like, I don't realize my neck's broken.
oh
Um,
my gosh.
and I'm like, I can't swallow properly. And I'm like, I'll try. And I'm like, imagine God, he must have been freaking out. And I'm like, I remember you, like the exorcist.
Oh my gosh.
Now the poor guy. But he was like basically telling me, the first thing he said was, you're one lucky little lady. And I'm listening, and he goes, can you remember what happened? And so I'm like, yeah. And I said, but you need to ask and I gave her name, Mim. You need to ask my old sweet mate, Mim. She saw it. She was a few cars behind me. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, and some lady put her name on the front seat of the car, so it should be somewhere. And I'm like, there was a guy in a uniform, and he reached in to turn the engine off so the car wouldn't blow up. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was you. And now he's like shook, and he's
Mm,
kind of like backing up with this little notebook, and all of a sudden the penny drops for both of us,
uh-huh.
because I had just come to again. And now he realizes and I realize at the same time, uh-oh, something's happened here, right? And he goes, there's no way you could know. There is no way. I'm the one who turned off the engine. I'm the one who was there when they pulled you out with. And I was like, ooh. And I had no
Mm,
word. I mean, what could I say? You know, he's having one experience of it and I'm having another.
yeah.
And yeah, so from that moment forward, I was kind of left to deal with, like, who do you talk to about that? you know, I was left to deal
Wow.
with a whole host of injuries that continued to reveal themselves. It was a Saturday afternoon in a teaching hospital, and so many things were missed. And then I developed a relationship with this chiropractor called Dr. Anthony Ross in Charleston, on Johns Island, who was a genius. And he just literally took my body apart like a puzzle and began like when I say genius, I mean genius. And he was like, look here, here's C5 and C6 that are fractured, and here's T2 that's fractured, and here's your pelvis, here's the crack here. And then in the meantime, I'm going into the gynecologist who's like, listen, sits me down, and I'm about to marry my sweetheart. And they're like, guys, you're not going to be able to hold a pregnancy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. So the way my little brain processes things, I was like, okay, that was out. I didn't grieve it mourning or anything. I was 21 years old. Like, I wasn't thinking about getting pregnant,
Okay.
So now it's just suddenly off the table.
Okay.
So it wasn't like I wasn't traumatized because I couldn't have babies. The trauma was when I found out I could have babies.
Oh,
and I'm like,
okay.
what is happening here?
Yeah, because you said you had daughters. So I was thinking
I have
maybe you
2, 17 and
adopted.
19. Yeah, nope. There, I had them, and defied gravity. I wasn't supposed to do it. So that was really wild. But I was very fortunate that I had this guy who was just, he loved, and he still does, he still practices, loves what he does so much that he took the time and the effort and the energy to walk me through. And I was so fascinated. And now things started making sense because Judge, the dead grandfather, who had been a medical surgeon, he was a medical doctor. He comes to me and he goes, we're sending you to chiropractic school. And I'm like, first of all, he used to say we all the time. Like, who says we? Who are we talking about here?
Yeah.
And I'm like, excuse me? Are they even doctors? What is that? And, then when I met Dr. Ross and he was taking me through the process, it started making sense because I fought tooth and nail. And I'm like, dude, I just finished 4 years of college. I am not going back to school, and I'm certainly not going to long enough to become a doctor. Not happening, and then I did.
And then you did.
Yeah. So I was very lucky. But what happened is the last thing that I remember in that space between when I was with those guardians was them explaining to me that I was going to come back with enhanced gifts. Now, remember at this stage at 21, and when you're, hanging around and you've got parents who are so freaked out by what you're able to do, we don't really think of these things as gifts. It was funny. I could write the eulogies for the people in my dad's church with the dead guy sitting there. Is that a gift? I guess, and so it was this kind of thing where all of a sudden I'm going, oh, these are gifts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm actually supposed to be doing something with this stuff. Oh, that's why the accident happened. Okay. It's not all party. So the accident had actually been set up by me. Mm-hmm. That if I had come into this incarnation with these gifts and had made it to adulthood without discovering how to use them, that I was going to set up a major event that was going to give me a choice to leave or to use the gifts. And this was the accident. So back I come with these enhanced abilities. And now all of a sudden I'm in chiropractic school. And the reason they put me in there was because chiropractic, the way that I learned it in the school setting that I was in, was very much so a mind, body, spiritual based philosophy where, you're not just a meat suit, full of pieces and parts that can be taken. They're all intricately intertwined and everything is working together. And, the state of the emotional body is going to have a direct and immediate impact on that physical body, and vice versa. And so, I'm learning this vitalistic philosophy of life because I'm also putting my hands on a lot of people legally.
Right.
And one of the gifts that I came back in with was this capacity to download what was like a hard drive. There weren't even hard drives in that day. Computers were kind of only just becoming a thing. Right. And, so it was like downloading a hard drive of someone's core information. Huh. So let's say somebody came to me and they had cancer. I'm going to be able to go download the information that tells me exactly why they have it, when they have it, what at what point they gave the power away. What purpose is it to serve? Because they're not victims of cancer. They're utilizing cancer in the human form in order to bring their attention to something that needs correction, a course that needs to
Hmm.
be altered in their day-to-day lives. Right. So like, that's a lot, you
It's a
know?
lot.
And so I'm like, okay, this is cool. So that's what that was. You come back in and they've changed everything. And now all of a sudden I have that. So
Wow.
with that comes a capacity to manipulate energy in a positive way in order to help them use that information. So in the early days, the very, very early days, it was super cool because I could literally, I can still do this, but I don't do this. Yeah. I could touch somebody and make something go away.
Well,
Ooh, how cool is that?
like what
Feed my
kinds of
ego.
things?
Oh, here's
Is that
Sherman.
is that with energy you're
Mr.
talking
Peabody and
about?
Sherman, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. So,
So, like with energy, so you can make what, like a tumor go away? Is that what you mean?
oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's all vibrations. All you're doing is altering the vibration. So it's like
Okay.
tuning a guitar,
Wow.
so
Okay.
anytime there is a dis-ease process going on in the body, it just means the body's out of tune. It's out of alignment with its mission, or
Oh,
it can be
okay.
exactly in alignment with what it's meant to be doing. Because remember, we perceive things that don't feel good as suffering. We perceive them as bad or not good. I don't see it that way because I have met plenty of people who have had, cancer or another disease process in their life
Hmm.
that know for a fact that that came into their life in order to present them with the opportunity to make some great changes that needed to be made,
Hmm.
you know?
Okay.
Um, so what happens is that, back in the early day and I remember I'm young and, I'm like, oh my gosh, how cool is this? They had cancer and now they don't, fabulous for your ego. But
Yeah.
thank God I learned very, very quickly that this was not what it was about.
Oh, okay.
Um, because I think people have, a lot of people actually possess that capacity and they get caught into the realms of, well, I'm healing the individual.
Hmm.
Guys, I'm a window washer. So here's me wiping the window clean so that people can see out for themselves and heal themselves. All
Hmm.
I'm doing is going in and identifying the muck and drawing
Okay.
their attention to that and then hitting them with a bolt of energy that allows them to go in and make those changes,
Hmm. Okay.
because that's empowerment.
Yeah.
Because you'll see a lot of people who will go through and for whatever various ways and means they heal themselves. It could be with chemo or it could be with a healer or whatever. Um, and they heal a process and then it comes back.
Hmm.
Why does it do that?
Hmm.
Because the underlying emotional attachment to that process was not addressed.
Hmm.
So, I mean, we can pew, pew, blast those little cancer cells away, and not address why we got them in the first place. And guess what? It's going to show up somewhere else.
Hmm.
And thank goodness I learned that very early on and understood um, what it meant to actually teach and empower the individual. So that's kind of what I've been doing ever since.
Wow. So you can now you do this through in the days of this virus. So you have clients that you see, but do you also do Zoom sessions with people?
Theoretically, yes. I always had in the past, but I've in the last year, the doctor that I had working for me had to leave. And so I ended up going back in and I was like, what fresh hell is this, guys? Really? You're putting me back at 51, working on people all day long, banging away, and my shoulders are going to fall out of the sockets. What is
Mm.
happening here? But what did happen was I go back in and I got the opportunity to be in a lot of people's space. And I got to, because what I can do is I can pitch and tone and hear diseased.
Okay.
And so I got to pitch and tone the exact frequencies of people who had early COVID, people who had the fear behind what was happening, people who were choosing to get vaccinated, people who were choosing not to get vaccinated, people who were manifesting things post vaccination, people who were getting COVID and recovering. Every single one of those things has a sound. So I was able in that space to create a frequency. And it's a free download, guys, on my website, Mary Helen Hensley, HENSLEY.com. It's the first thing that's going to pop up.
Whoa. Okay. I
And
gotta
I've
check
got
that out.
people pulling themselves out of off of ventilators, off of, out of the angst and
Wow.
the fear.
Hmm.
I couldn't. This is the funniest bit. Like, and they're like, "Oh, you're anti," and I'm like, "I'm not anti anything. I am all about experience, and I'm all about bodily autonomy and being able to make my own choices. I'm not, not deeply appreciative of all of that carry on, but I get it. So the reason I created the frequency is because it's got a whole bunch of other frequencies in it, such as fear, releasing past trauma, the angst. What's happening right
Mm.
now is a tremendous amount of people who are incarnate right now, the 8.1 billion of us who are going through this together. And a whole lot of us have come from a period in time, roughly 3,685 years ago, when we had our last major global cataclysm. And a lot
Okay.
of people got catastrophophobia. So, what the energy of
Huh.
the whole COVID thing is doing for them is it's bringing up this cellular memory where a whole lot of people died.
Oh,
So the fear
okay.
behind that is being triggered by, you got the media frenzy, and we're constantly feeding into the fear of this. And what's happening is people are becoming angst ridden by an old memory.
Interesting.
Because
3,000.
the
What was
vast
that number
majority of
that you happen
people,
to know?
13,685.
13,000. Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, you came back with a lot of knowledge. Do you continue to get, so you continue to get downloads to,
Dude, I'm like Sheldon from the Big Bang. It's everybody makes fun of me.
it's so,
you know,
I'm just like, and I'm just real curious, your guardians, do you still see them and do you
oh,
interact
sure.
with
Yeah,
them?
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
also called guides. Would you call them guides? Same name?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Um,
just for fun, let's throw in there that there are so many other realities other than this one. And so, just spoiler alert, the next thing coming, you just gone through a major uh, pandemic,
mhm.
and it's altered and changed everything. And of course, now they're dripping in. They've been trying to do it for a little while. The next thing is going to be extraterrestrials. Guys, they've been here for ages, ages and ages and ages, longer than we have. And the stuff that you're going to see is actually holographic. It's not
Okay,
real. It's
so the
not the way that it is. So
disclosure,
just be
you've heard that
aware.
word, right?
Yeah.
Disclosure. These are going to be not, I think what you're saying are these ETs or aliens are going to start appearing, but it's more of a holographic. They're not coming in the physical like in craft.
Well, yeah, some of there are, there are craft, and there are, but a lot of people who see those things are seeing something completely different than what they think they're seeing. But
Hmm.
the next step in the unfolding of this process here,
Okay,
remember, we're trying to
this
this
planet
exactly,
to
so now
raise.
what we want to do, we've terrified the crap out of everybody. And so now we want to unite
Okay.
against a common enemy.
Oh,
Okay. So we've created this divisiveness. And
yeah.
so anything that's not just like us, we get afraid of. It's bad. It's bad.
Right.
So, oh my gosh, what do you mean? There's life. You're seeing it. There's more and more press happening about it. And so what they're doing is they're creating the buildup like they always do. That's just how this world works. And the next thing you're going to see is some pretty spectacular shows. But it doesn't mean that ETs aren't amongst us and part of us, because they are. But what you'll be seeing isn't necessarily of them, if you get me.
Okay, wait a
Man-made,
minute. So
man-made
you're
and generated.
saying
Yes, that's
what
what I'm saying.
I think so the powers that be are kind of trying to be puppet masters here and create different scenarios,
Yeah.
and the virus was the first plan A, B, whatever part of it, and now some of this disclosure is not real disclosure. It's still people, powers that be, trying to play with humanity in a way that they want, mold us like clay or something.
Well, don't think, and see, when people say powers that be as well, remember, a lot of them are human beings.
Yeah. No, that's what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
Because
So
I don't want to name names or anything. So I'll just say
yeah, we know who they are. Um, and also bear in mind too, this is a fascinating thing. There are teams of us. I work for a team as well. That's why I'm okay to talk about this, and I'm not going to end up dead tomorrow morning. Because there is a balance here. Earth
oh,
Whether people like it or not, there's a dichotomy of dark and light here that's meant to be here. This is why we come here. Souls
Hmm.
come here to experience this playground. And
Okay.
my favorite example for that is like if somebody, if somebody who was woke is outside the gates of Harvard University pounding on the gates and they're like, I want to learn how to cook. And they're like, we don't teach cooking here. Well, that's my right and my privilege. And that's something that I need to do. And you need to accommodate me and I need to be able to cook here. And they're like, we don't teach cooking. That's not this facility. There's a great school down the road that teaches cooking. Well, that's not where I want to go. I want to go here. So you need to accommodate me. And they're going, well, we don't, because that's not what we do. And so a lot of people are learning some very hard lessons right now, under the guise of some really great causes. And some things that should fall under common human decency. We've got some causes that are drawing attention towards the fact that we all need to be exactly the same. And I have a real problem with that because this is an experiential planet. It's not fair. It's not meant to be fair. We all can incarnate in here in any number of different circumstances where sometimes you get the bear and sometimes the bear gets you. That's the way this place is set up. Okay. So it's really cool to kind of recognize that there are teams that are helping create those experiences. So what does that mean? That there are those, how we love to talk about, oh my gosh, this happened and my angels were there, or the people that you hear, oh, God is good because my husband didn't die of COVID in the hospital, or da 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 da,
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm going, do you say that when things aren't working out?
Yeah.
You really don't ever hear the whole God is good when I'm at the bottom of the barrel thing. You hear it when people got what they wanted.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Of course.
And that's a real interesting human characteristic that cracks me up. So it's kind of like that, it's there are those who are here to create these positive, amazing experiences and those who are here to stir the pot. And equally, stop, guys.
I think somebody's playing with a toy.
They are. It's
Oh, you have a
Mr.
couple of
Peabody
them.
and Sherman playing together.
Oh, okay.
Those are my rescue pups. Yeah, so they are.
So you have so who's your team? Do you want to share a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
I would fall under both categories. So there are some people who would think that I'm just, oh my God, the most loving, amazing, wonderful thing in the world. And then there are other people who my job is to, and I will get in their face and get up close and personal with that information that I know and go, shit or get off the pot, make a choice. And they don't like it, and it's really uncomfortable. And I'll create a set of circumstances that forces them to take the next step because they've forgotten how to do it. So it's, I work on both sides of that fence.
Okay.
As do an awful lot of people. Some tend to work more towards other, the one side than others. And so, when you look at people that you think are inherently evil, you have to remember that when you've got an entity or being that is incarnate in order to play a certain role, sometimes the role that has become the most pain for you is the one that's creating the most growth for you. And somebody has to do that. Because if we came in here and everybody was la 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 nice and perfect and wonderful all the time, what's the point?
Yeah.
There's no point of being here. There are other places that are really cool like that and that are really loving like that. And there are some other places that are even lower vibe than here. So just realize that this is not the only experience that we have.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, what's your idea about, or what are your thoughts on reincarnation and
Yeah,
reincarnating
come and go
onto
here as
other
long as you want to. Yeah, as long as you want to. And are there other spaces and absolutely. So, we like to, people love to talk about, and they love to name drop, I'm Pleiadian, or I'm Arcturian, or that's like going, I live in Ireland, right? I've lived here for longer than I've lived anywhere else. And if someone said, hey, where are you from? And I'd be like, oh, Martinsville, Virginia. Right.
Yeah.
I haven't lived there since I was 17.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
But it's where I come from here because it's where I grew up. Okay. So a lot of people will tend to remember or attach to certain places where they have fond memories or they remember great periods of growth or hardship.
Okay.
But those aren't your origin is source. That's your origin.
Ultimately.
The last space that you incarnated in you might claim as home.
Okay.
And when
Okay.
I'm traveling across America, I love to go, oh, I'm from Ireland, because it makes me new and different. And when I'm in Ireland, my Southern accent gets really thick because it makes me new and different. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just what we do. And so we claim places. You could be Pleiadian, Arcturian, Syrian, Lyran. You could be all sorts of things. And those encompass this vibration here. They're part of this world that we live in here. They're connected to this earth experience. There are a gazillion and one others,
Hmm.
which is
There,
really, really cool.
it is kind of cool. We are coming up on time here. This has been such a fascinating conversation. So
Thank you
much,
so much for having me.
so much. But I do want the listeners to be able to get a hold of you and let us know what projects you have worked on or that's coming out, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. MaryHelenHensley.com. That's where, unfortunately, right now, because I'm back in the office full time, I'm I'm so far behind on catching up with healing sessions and all. It'll change eventually, but it is what it is right now. And I'm where I need to be at the moment. So I'm quite slow to respond about the healing sessions because I'm just inundated at the moment and can't even begin to catch up on them. So my apologies in advance for that. You can still send emails and all, and I'll get to them eventually. But yeah, there's all sorts of fun stuff on there. There's all of my books are there. I have an Audible book that came out in 2019, and it's the first of its kind. It's the first audiobook on Amazon to be backed by these healing frequencies. So
Oh,
when I'm telling the story,
uh-huh.
the frequencies that are relevant to the story are playing in the background so that
Oh,
someone has the opportunity while they're listening to it to actually connect with, heal, and release something that would be of similar vibration in their own experience.
oh gosh, that's cool.
It is cool. It's so
Wow.
exciting. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's there. And then there's an album on there called Larimar Dreams.
Mhm.
And there's a whole bunch of the frequencies, and there's a listener's guide. And these would be engineered by a friend of mine, so that they're of the highest quality, but they also have a whole bunch of stuff in them that help enhance the brainwave states as the listener is using those.
Hmm.
And so, because that's what it's all about. We're all just frequencies sped up or slowed down,
Mhm.
on the same beam of light. But so this is something that gives people. There's literally a frequency for everything, everything, everything. And even to people come in, God, I wish I could talk to my mother. I miss her so much. There is 963 hertz. You can meet somebody who has passed in 963 hertz. So there's on that album, there's something called divine alignment, where somebody can go into a meditative state. We've enhanced the brain wave, hit the frequency of 963 hertz, where they can elevate their frequency to that. And the individual who's out of body can lower their frequency to that, and they can meet up. I just
Whoa.
literally finished birthing a book with somebody here whose mother passed 2 years ago, and her mother helped us write the book using that
Whoa.
frequency.
Oh my goodness. We
Yep.
could we could have so many different I'm realizing conversations, interviews, and because you have so much, there's so much material, there's so many experiences. And anyway, I just realizing there's more stuff I want to dive into, but I know we got to go. But this is okay. And any last words, anything else? I just want to make sure, anything on your heart.
Nah,
Okay.
you already are that which you seek. That's the secret of the universe.
Thank you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. This has been so fun. And thank you to everyone for watching. This has been Julie McVey with Unordinary Made Ordinary, and I hope you'll join us next time for another fascinating interview. If you enjoyed this, of course, please give it a thumbs up. And then if you like this type of content, subscribe. And I hope you're having a fantastic day or evening, wherever you are on the planet or off the planet. And we'll see you next time. Bye.